Alright, this is a video I've shot before, both parts of this video. This knife here is a Strider SMF, which I'm sure most of you guys know. I've had it for about a year, used it a decent amount. I think you can see there, it's got a little bit of wear, nothing terrible. This is PSF 27 steel, which is kind of like D2. The edge is still slightly sharp, but it's not as sharp as I would like it. You can see it'll cut paper, phone book paper, but it's a bit of a chore. It's a bit of a chore, so this knife needs an edge in my opinion. The first thing I'm gonna do, since it hasn't been cleaned since I've had it, I'm gonna tear it down and just set the parts aside, and then I'm gonna clean up the parts once I have the blade sharpened and put it all back together. So what I'm gonna need in order to do that is, or what I use in order to do this, I guess is a better way to say it, is a 1/8 inch hex bit. And you can see this, I've taken apart quite a few Striders. You can see the wear there on the end of it. I use this tool right here, which is the PSD monkey wrench from Monkey Edge. Sometimes they have this tool available, sometimes they don't. You don't have to use a tool like this. You can use something as simple as a bicycle spanner wrench, and I think you can pick those up for like $10 or $15. I don't remember the right size, but the thing about this tool is it allows you to really adjust the tension very precisely, because you have so much purchase on this tool, and you can really get in there and torque it down specifically. It fits hinders and Striders, and the bit here fits the handle screw, so it's a pretty convenient tool. So those are the two things I'm going to need to break it down. I'm going to clean it with this Aegis EDCI solution here, which I've used for years, and I'm going to put it back together and lubricate it with this oil, which is nano oil 10 weight, which I've also used for years. And I use varying weights depending on the knife. Sometimes I even mix oil and grease. This time I'm just going straight oil. We'll see what that does. Oh, and a shop rag to help me clean the knife once I get to that point. So let's go ahead and start. I'm going to start by loosening the handle screws. And again, you can see how much the tool helps out. Those two little arms really help spin the screw out pretty quickly. The centrifugal force helps, so you can see I can break it down pretty quickly. This is the first time I've taken this knife apart. One thing you want to kind of keep an eye on when you're taking screws out of a knife like a dual gunner grip knife or a gunner grip knife is that usually on the older ones, and I don't think that's going to be the case this time, but on the older ones, the screws were different sizes. It looks like all of these are the same size. So that's the last screw. Yeah, like I said, they're pretty much they're all the same size. Now I'm going to take this bit here, and I'm going to place the spanner end in this side. I'm going to hold this, and I'm going to take my 1/8 inch hex wrench, and I'm going to stick it in this side of the knife. You can turn either side, it doesn't really matter. There we go, it's coming apart. Usually once I get it apart a fair amount, you can kind of press it down and usually turn the one side. So I'm just gonna continue to loosen this up until it's loose, till it's out. Kind of difficult doing it around the tripod, so bear with me. Oh, I've got the wrong side. There we go. All right, it doesn't feel like it's quite loose enough, so I'm going to go back to the wrench here, and I'm just going to sit it down like this. We'll give it a few more turns. Hopefully we'll get it off here. Sometimes these pivots have Loctite. If your pivot does happen to have Loctite on it, you can heat it with a soldering iron. Sometimes that's what people use, or you can heat it with you can dip it into some warm water, or almost boiling water. So that is the one side of the screw, and the reason why I pulled it apart in this way is because the shaft is going to hold this whole blade assembly and the washers on there. You can see how dirty it is in there, so I'm just going to lay this out kind of sort of in the order that the knife came apart, like that, and like that. So sometimes people say this matters, sometimes they don't. I've found that it really hasn't mattered in my experience. But the sides of the washers that were touching the blade, I'll face up, and then I will leave all of the other parts just kind of lined up like this, so that way I know where everything goes. And I'm just going to, because I'm going to sharpen this knife, I'm just going to take this rag here and throw it over this whole assembly or disassembled knife, and I'm just going to use the blade because that's what I need to sharpen. So that's it for this part. I'm going to cut to the sharpening section where I'm just going to sharpen the blade, and then we'll go back to the assembly. All right, I'm at the point where I want to set up my knife in the wicked edge. Now, I haven't sharpened anything on this wicked edge yet. I usually don't suggest that just because I find that the stones, the diamond stones, the texture changes over time, but these feel pretty close to the stones that I had before. So I'm gonna go ahead and give it a shot. One of the most important things you can have is a tablet or some kind of electronic file or somewhere where you've written all the settings for specific knives that you plan on sharpening. So you can see here I'm sharpening in SMF. So I'm going to put it in the bottom slot right here, and I'm going to put it on between B5.5 and B2.25, and I'm going to sharpen at 18.5 degrees per side. Now, I've already kind of cheated a little bit. I did fit it in here to see, make sure everything worked okay and all, but I haven't sharpened anything. I did mark the edge. You want to mark your edge with Sharpie, just so you can make sure that you're hitting the entire bevel. I'm going to stick, and I know this is backwards here, by the way, but that's how I've always done it. I usually like to work from the right side. So I'm going to put this pin in here, which I have noticed that these prongs are plastic. Don't necessarily love that. I think I'm going to see if I can't find a metal replacement like the original ones were. But anyway, I've got just the blade here. I'm going to place it in here. I'm going to line it up. Right here would be B, that's B.5, and that's B.25, or B.25 and B.5. So I'm gonna tighten this up, and I will tell you, it does take a lot of force to tighten this up. I don't know, maybe it's just the thickness of this particular SMF blade. The one thing that I always check is to make sure that the blade is sitting perfectly perpendicular to the base, or as close to perpendicular as possible. What that's going to do is it's going to give you an even bevel on either side, because if it's shifted one way or the other, that's going to throw off your bevel. One is going to be smaller, one is going to be larger, and you don't want that. So the way I personally check that is to turn on my angle cube, zero my angle cube, which I've noticed on this base it seems to be taking a little bit longer. I don't know why. Zero my angle cube, and I'm just going to place it on the bottom of this black part and on the blade itself. I've got 4.05 on this side. I've got 4.3 on this side. That is pretty doggone close. That was my first concern, is this going to actually self-level itself? Now, the first time I put this in here, I got 4.15 on this side and 4.3 on this side. So that was even closer, but that's still pretty close. The next thing that I want to do is I like to use my 1000 grit stone, and I put the 1000 grit stone on to the arm. I place it onto the side of the knife pretty much as even as I can with the vise itself, and as flat to the knife as possible, so I don't want the stone rocked one way or the other. Then I make sure my angle cube is zeroed again. I pick the stone up, I place it as close to the top and as flush with the top as possible. I want it pretty much straight up and down. I drop it back down, and I read my measurement. Now, I wanted 18.5. When I had this up here before, it was reading between 18.4 and 18.5. Right this second, it's reading 18.6. I'm gonna back this screw out here, which is a set screw, and I'm going to turn this to the right or away from me. Now it's reading 18.5, but what I like to do is remove the stone, place it back on there, take another reading. Okay, it's still reading 18.6. Let's try this again. It's reading 18.5. I'm gonna call that good enough. I'm gonna repeat the same thing on the other side. And one thing you'll notice there that's different from the other wicked edges is there's a rubber bar sitting right here. So when I drop that arm, it doesn't really make a loud clanging noise like the other ones do. So that's also another improvement. I'm gonna check the other side, and I wanna do the same exact thing. I wanna make sure that my angle cube is zeroed. It is. I want to place it on the stone just as I did before. And I want to put it onto here again without the stone rocking and as close to the middle as possible. Now this side I have not adjusted, and it's reading 19.0 inches. So now it's reading 20. So what I want to do is loosen the set screw, and I want to turn the adjustable screw towards me. So it's reading 18.45. Let's pull it back, sit it down. It's reading 18.6. Turn it a little bit closer to me. Now it's reading 18.4, 18.5. Let's see. 18.5, so I'm gonna set it up, and now we're all ready to sharpen, guys. That's it. So this was easier to set up than my other wicked edge, which is what I was hoping for. Very easy. It centers the blade. The angle adjustments are very easy to make. You can see here, everything has a knurled screw, so I'm just adjusting screws. I don't have to use a tool. When I flip this clamp, it locks it into place. I may look at a different set of jaws here if I'm going to sharpen something like an SMF, because what I did notice is, like I said, it's very, very tight. I could probably lift this 30-pound wicked edge up by this knife. So with that being said, I'm gonna place my 1000 grit stone back on the side. I'm going to run it along the edge here very lightly, and I want to see where it's removing that material. So I can see that pretty much all the way through here, it's removing it pretty much exactly on the bevel. Out here, it's hitting it a little bit closer to the shoulder, which means it's going to broaden that edge a little bit, which is to be expected. The edge varies on the factory strider. It's a little bit more obtuse at the tip, and it's a little bit more acute back here towards the heel and the middle part of the blade. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, make sure we're looking pretty decent. Let's see. I can see here again, it's looking pretty decent, so I'm content with that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to brush my stone off the best I can. You won't get everything off of here. And actually, I think I need a new toothbrush because that's making the stone dirtier, it looks like. All right, so I'm gonna brush that off with the toothbrush, and I'm gonna put these up. Now, typically what I do is I don't start too low in the grit count, because I find the stones like the 100s and the 200s pretty aggressive, especially at this point with them being brand new, but I need to break them in. So I'm gonna go ahead and use them just because they're here. So I'm gonna pull out my 100s and my 200s, and these are taped a little bit differently than the other stones are. And I'm gonna go ahead and form a burr on either side, on one side of the knife bevel itself. And once I have a burr on the one side of the knife bevel, I'm gonna turn around and flip it over to the other side. And I'm gonna do that a few times just to make sure I've apexed that edge. And from there, we'll progress through the grits. Now, at this point, I'm probably gonna show you guys the 100 and the 200 because I should be able to apex this pretty quickly, but I'm not gonna go through all of these with you guys because it'll take forever. So I'm probably just gonna do the 100 and the 200, and I'll cut back in once I get closer to the end. And I'm probably not gonna go too high in the grit count on these. I'm probably just gonna go up to 1000 grit. I think that should be sufficient. So here we go. And again, can you hear how aggressive that sounds? I mean, that's pretty rough. It sounds like gravel running across the bevel. Again, as I'm doing this, I'm checking to see where that marker has been removed. And you can see it's been removed pretty much along the entire edge, except for right here at the very tip. So I can already kind of feel a burr coming up. I'm gonna hit this tip a little bit more. And now I usually use a fair amount of pressure, but again, because these stones are new, I'm barely putting any pressure on these stones at all. So I can feel that burr kind of starting to raise on the heel. At the tip, I can still see some of that marker, so I know we haven't apexed that edge because I can visually see that. All right, now one tip that I suggest is I don't form a full burr on one side, especially at these rough grits, because I'm gonna remove more material on this side. So as I remove material, that it should kind of settle in and it should find its apex. So I'm gonna go over to the other side and remove this marker and see if we're not quite there with the burr. All right, I can feel that burr flipping over to the other side. Again, at the tip, it needs some more work. Now, one thing that you may be asking is, I see you kind of switching sides. Everybody has their own technique. If you look at the Wicked Edge guys, they kind of do more of a technique like this. I didn't learn like that. I didn't start like that. So I do one side, get the burr or get close to a burr, and then I switch over to the other side. So that's just my preferred method. We're gonna go back over to the other side. All right, let's see. I can really feel that burr now. Again, towards the tip, it's not quite there, but let me show you what we got just at 100 grit. Uh-oh. I would say that's much sharper than what we started with. So now that I've pretty much got to sharpen the edge, like I said, that burr is kind of holding it back. If I remove that burr, it would be even sharper. I'm gonna move on to 200 and go on up to 1,000. Like I said, I'll catch you guys in just a second when I'm back at 1,000. I've just finished with the 1,000 grit stones, but I'm gonna actually use my 1,200 and 1,600 grit ceramics. The edge is just a little bit toothy for my liking. As you can see, my dog has joined me. And with these, I just do the same type of follow through that I did with the diamond stones. I'm gonna go up and down on either side. Really what I'm trying to do here is just kind of refine this edge a little bit more and just really make sure that that burr is gone. So you can see that the bevel is pretty consistent all the way through, which is always a good sign. You can see it's pretty close to the factory angle, 18.5 degrees. It's kind of a good compromise between something that is going to be pretty tough and something that's going to be more along the lines of slicing. Usually when you think slicer blades, usually you're going to want to be more in that 15 degree per side range. But for something like this, I like something a little bit more obtuse. So I'm going to kind of feel that and you'll see what I have here. I mean, I think that that is plenty sharp. It's much sharper than the knife that I started with. Much sharper than the knife I started with. I'm just gonna go ahead, since I already have it out, I'm gonna hit it on the 1600 grit side too. And there's a slight polish coming up on the bevel of this. Like I said, I didn't really do it for the polish. I did it to kind of knock that burr off and to really refine the edge just that little bit more. Those 1000 grit stones are still a little bit rough. I don't think you'll be able to see it in the video, but there are some diamonds that come off the first time you use these stones. This is my second wicked edge, my second set of stones. Each wicked edge came with a set of stones. So that happened with my first set as well. Usually after the first few sharpenings, the stones kind of even out and you don't have to worry about that too much, but I have noticed that that is something that happens. So just for whatever that's worth. So that is the 1600 grit. Feels like there might be a little bit of a burr still left on this side. All right, I think that's pretty good. Yep, definitely sharp enough. I'm gonna remove this from the wicked edge. I'm gonna put it back out with the part. I'm gonna clean the blade off, put it back out with the parts, and then we'll jump back into the assembly. One thing I wanted to mention, and I don't know how well you'll be able to see this, but remember I said I was sharpening at 18.5 degrees. This is actually set on 21 degrees down here in order for me to set it at 18.5 up here. So I always use an angle cube just to make sure my angle is correct. One of my fears was that, well, two of my fears was that it would not make the blade perpendicular. It wouldn't self-level the knife like it claimed the jaws do. Did a pretty good job of that. Slightly off, but at least as close as I could do with 5 minutes of adjusting on my old wicked edge. And this this adjustment here that moves both arms in and out at the same time. I was nervous that it wouldn't be accurate, and sure enough, it's not accurate. But you do have micro adjustments up here that allow you to be able to make the adjustments necessary. So it's not an issue. Just make sure you use an angle cube and double check. Everything is cleaned up. You can see, well, first you can see how filthy that rag is. And here you can see the knife has been cleaned up. It's been sharpened. That edge is pretty close to the factory. You can see I've removed all of the, well, maybe not some right here of the marker, but some alcohol will take that off. And you saw the blade is sharp. So now what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna try to do this around the camera, I'm gonna start with the G10 side of the scale. I'm going to put the female pivot in, like so. I'm gonna take my 10 weight nano oil, and I'm really thinking maybe I should switch over. I'm gonna use 10 weight right this second. I'm going to add a few droplets of oil right where the washer is gonna go. And this washer is the washer that goes on this side. We'll drop that down, and what that oil does is it helps that washer stay, so I don't have to worry about it falling. So I'm going to put some oil around the pivot itself. I'm gonna put a few more drops. If it's too much, all I have to do is clean it off. It's not a big deal, so I don't mind using a decent amount. I usually put 1 drop, north, south, east, and west, so that's usually how I've added. And then I'm going to put the knife blade on. Once the knife blade is on, I'm going to add a few more droplets of the oil, and here I usually only put 3 because it does tend to run off on that side. So I'm not gonna put too much here because I don't want it to get on that lock face if I can help it. 3 more droplets here. I'm going to place the titanium scale on, just like so. I'm going to put these screws back in. Like this, and these screws are all the same size, so it doesn't really matter. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually snug these screws here, these 3 towards the back. I'm going to snug those up pretty tight. And like I said, the handle on this tool really help you get a grip and really apply a good amount of torque where you need it, and you can really kind of dial in the torque. This screw, I'm gonna snug it up, but I'm not gonna really tighten it a lot because that screw has a lot to do with the smoothness of the knife. So I'm not really gonna tighten it up too much. I'm gonna drop this pivot in the back, or drop this half of the pivot in the back, and we'll screw it in. Felt like it was a little bit tight, but we'll see. Back it off some. You can see it drops. There's a little bit of side to side play, so the first thing I'm going to adjust is this screw. Still a little bit of side to side play, so I'm going to adjust the pivot a little bit more. And that is it, guys. It's back together. All of the play taken out. That'll smooth back in, but you can see it is dropping free. No lock stick, and let's see if it's sharp. You can see it is much sharper than when we first started. So mission accomplished. The knife has been disassembled, cleaned up, and reassembled. Remember, a lazy man carries a dull knife.